Can you give me some
So,
examples? Yeah, I'm just curious what that would look like.
oh, oh no. Welcome back to another episode of Convos.dev. I'm Jess.
I'm Chris.
Today we're going to be talking about AI and just like
Yeah.
the new things that are happening in AI.
And this happened mostly because like I use AI, but kind of we're probably on opposite sides of the spectrum. Like Jess has kind of developed an expertise in this area, especially around technical AI, and I use it like in Cursor, but other than that, and like ask it basic questions and do some image and video generation. But I would say I'm a very light user. So I'm more curious, like what are the big things happening right now in the AI space? Like what are new tools that are coming out that are interested to look at? So I don't know where you want to take this, Jess, but basically I'm the student and I just want you to chat with me about kind of like what's new and what would I need to know if I've kind of just been on the outskirts.
I have no answers to any of those questions. Uh,
Well, thanks everyone
I
so much for watching. Well,
This will be a chill one. Like I did not prepare anything for this. Um I also like if you've heard our other podcast episodes, I have been in between jobs. So I start my new job in January, I quit in end of October, and I'm not gonna lie, like having a job because I worked in AI DevRel, I would say having a job is what pushed me a lot to like learn about AI because I had to for work. I've kind of slowed down in the months off, kind of playing around with some stuff, but not really anything cutting edge. And I really have honestly stayed off of tech Twitter, um, which is where I get a lot of my like really cutting edge news, stuff like that. So I would say I'm not caught up at all.
like it changes so frequently that even if you were caught up by the time this comes out in a couple of weeks, it would already be behind. So we can talk more general, and that's totally fine. I could still use that help.
So like one thing I was reading about is there's like really interesting studies around, so there's like LLMs, right? Like Gemini and Claude and stuff like that. And obviously they are quite expensive. And I was reading a bunch of these studies about how a lot of people are using SLMs, small language models, and
Huh.
essentially breaking up a lot of tasks into SLMs, which are trained on like smaller data sets, but also like very niche ones, like maybe just one for medical knowledge or something like that, and just one for, I don't know, doing math or like very small models. But then just having them execute, so essentially breaking a large task down into multiple different things and then just having SLMs work on each one of them. And they found that it's actually more accurate and cheaper than having a LLM, like the big LLMs work on the whole thing. I used Notebook LM to do this, so I basically found a bunch of links online and then just like put it into Notebook LM, and it kind of like created like a research study for me. But yeah, there's a bunch of like people doing like small experiments. Like they basically um had it work on a lot of like clinical trials where it was like analyzing clinical trials, and it was like multiple different tasks. And the more tasks they gave the LLM, they had an LLM work on it and a bunch of SLMs work on it. And the more tasks there were, the higher the accuracy for the SLMs were.
So was the idea here that you train these small language models super specifically, or is it just like they're more general still, but they're each working on a smaller part?
They're trained specifically
Okay.
on very specific knowledge and databases.
Can you give me some
So
examples? Yeah, I'm just curious what that would look like. Like specific coding things, or like you could do it like on one is trained specifically on like English to Spanish translation, or like something like that.
I wouldn't know exactly from the studies, but like from what I interpreted it as, it would be something like that. Or maybe one language that's specifically really good at like coding in Go or
Okay.
Ruby. Or yeah, English to Spanish translation or Chinese to German translation or like small things like that. Whereas LLMs are very like much broader level of knowledge,
Huh.
which I thought was really interesting. Another thing I've been learning about, like this is just it's just like random things, but and I also consult at a place that is trying to work on this problem, so that's why I've been like looking into this. Is A lot of people are trying to figure out how to parallelize agents right now. So, we've gotten to the point where AI models have gotten good enough that you can pretty much set it on a task and you can kind of trust it within reasonable constraints to do that task well. And so instead of now it's not worrying about whether it can do the task, but it's worrying about how much can I get done with multiple different agents working at once. And sometimes those are kind of just like five different agents working at five different things, but sometimes there are five different agents working on the same code base where you can overwrite changes and stuff. And so there's a couple tools coming out now where it's like, um, how can we have AI agents working on the same code base without overwriting each other if they're working on kind of like separate or same code base, but like on different Git work trees or something? How can you merge them back together at the end and things like that? And so there's, I think, a couple solutions where people are just doing like Git work trees, like doing it locally. But there's a couple of solutions where they're trying to run it in like containers, like Docker containers and things like that.
It's like Kubernetes for AI agents or something.
Exactly. And it's really interesting because it's similar to Git, right? And I don't have the best visualization of Git, but Git is very complex, right? You can create multiple different branches and fork things, and you have to merge the branches back, and you can always revert to a different commit or previous commit. And you can almost imagine there's now a similar hierarchy for AI agents, where instead of like a commit for code, it's almost a commit for a specific agent conversation. Like there are times. Actually, let me kind of go back. So, in when you're working with an agent, do you know about like context windows or things like that? Perfect. So, like when you're working with an agent, um, you give it a certain amount of context, right? Maybe you give it a documentation link and maybe a couple snippets of your code so that understands what it's trying to work on, and that all gets stored in a context window. And when it spits out an answer, the let's say you give it like prompt one and it gives you answer one, and then you ask question two, right? So prompt one and answer one will go into your context window and stay there in the agent's kind of memory as context. And so when you fork it at that specific point in time, like maybe you create a new agent, like agent two, based off of that, it forks it at that point of the context window. So even if you continue in agent one and you add a bunch of more context, agent two will have no understanding of that extra context that you add. So it's almost like forking agent conversations, which is really, really interesting, right? Like it's like Git, but for AI. and and it's an interesting problem because a lot of developers, they know how to use the fundamentals of Git, but they don't have a real I would like to claim that most developers don't understand Git the way they probably should.
Actually.
I don't know if you I don't. Like I don't.
Yeah, I don't
So
either.
um so
I know
then
what I
there's
have to know.
exactly. And so there's a lot of things where now that agents have a similar behavior style, like you can do the same thing, people don't have that mental model built up for what is actually happening when they're forking an agent or running multiple agents or having to merge different agents' context together or things like that. So it becomes very complicated, but it's something that's happening more as more people are trying to parallelize agents. So it's a very interesting like
Yeah.
problem.
That's a cool, like almost like software engineering problem to solve, which is a nice way to think about this as, as a developer is like, how are the engineers who are working on all this, like thinking, I'm interested how, I have a couple questions kind of that I've been playing with recently. So recently I created a CLI tool using Warp actually, which it was really good at, which was super cool. And I had to like create a whole plan and like I chatted through the plan and then had it start executing. But during that process, like I realized like my context window was like expanding quite a bit. And so I compressed it, but I'm not totally sure like how compression works, like when you should do it and how that interacts with like parallelization. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, so your context window is filled with like your conversation, right? You ask question one, you get answer one, ask question two, get answer two, and so on. And obviously, let's say you ask 10 questions, your context window is going to get larger and larger and larger because it's storing the nine previous questions and answers from that. So there's a certain point where it has to compress because essentially it's saying each context window can only store a certain amount of tokens, where tokens is synonymous to a couple of characters. So the more questions and answers, the more characters, and there's a certain point where that context window is saying, hey, I can't hold anymore. I've got to compress. Compression is basically, I think it's probably, I'm probably simplifying it, but in my head, it's just running a prompt that says, summarize this for me. It's literally just saying, summarize this for me, and it'll come up with a compacted summary of the 10 questions and answers that you already have in there.
Is there any way to like influence that compression? Could you say like make sure you always include things about this, or like, or not really?
I think it's probably internal code in whatever tool or LLM. I know not LLM, but whatever tool. So I believe Warp probably has some sort of internal compacting logic, and maybe Claude Code has its own compacting logic, and maybe Cursor has its own compacting logic. I believe. Don't quote me on any of these things, but yes, I believe that's how it works. What was your second question?
Like how that works with parallelization. I'm thinking like, let's say again, back to your idea of like, I've got agent one working, then I branch off and have agent two working. And let's say like I want to capture all that context that I continued on with agent one and pass it to agent two. Like I know that's some of what you're saying hasn't been solved, but I'm curious, like, are there any workflows currently or any ways to do that? Like, could I get that compressed version and then send it over to the other agent?
That's a great question. I think you might be able to ask the agent for its all the context that it has, but I think in terms of like currently existing workflows is that there are things like roles.md or context.md that usually sit in your code base that you can essentially they're just physical like markdown files that you can like drag and drop into the root of whatever project that you want to do. Um, but that is really interesting. I I don't know, and this is where like I think probably tools are trying to figure out how to do this correctly, which is like there's even issues right now is like a lot of tools don't allow you, like let's say you have agent one working and agent two working. Ideally, I would like to go into agent one and be like, can you access some of the context from at agent two, like at mention agent two, and like being able to at mention different agents. A lot of tools, I don't think I've used a tool that has that feature capability. If you're listening to this, if you know of a tool, like tell me because I'd like to try it out. But I don't think that's like a thing that exists right now. And so this is a really good problem that you're like pointing out, which is like it's hard to reference different agents in their internal like context windows or context and things like that.
Like obviously I don't work a ton in this space, but like ideally like my mental structure would be, let's say I have 10 agents, you know, just for the sake of a number, all working in the same code base on different issues. I would love to have like a main branch, like a main mental like memory for that whole project that I'm working on currently, like that existing project. And all 10 of those agents are always feeding back compressed versions of what they're doing. And then whenever an agent does anything, it first checks that main and says, okay, is anybody else working in this section? Are they changing the code? Like that kind of thing. Because I think like that enables a, like a whole new level of working. Like you're actually working in parallel. But I don't know if that even makes sense,
Yeah,
if
I
that's
mean, I
possible.
I
But I would like to
wonder.
have like a two-way street, you
I'll
know?
I'll bring that product idea up to the people that I work with. I think
Okay.
there's a lot of people trying to fix this problem, or I guess solve this problem right now, or think about what the right product activity should be for this right now.
Could you roll your own? Here's the idea. You have like an actual project that then can kick off other agents, right? So you have like one major agent, whatever you want to call that. And you have a markdown file in there that's just called context or context window or whatever. And in all the sub agents or whatever you want to call them, everything you ask it to do, you always say before you do anything, first check against this one file. And then like whatever, let's just say like it's basically like a curl. And then say every time you do anything, read back to that file or read back to that main agent and have that main agent add it to the file. Like I wonder if there's a way to just roll your own like this.
Because it's really just a physical file.
Well, cool. This is helpful just to kind of think through like the AI space and what people are thinking about. Because other than you know, kind of the basic ideas of asking it to do something and it either doing a good job or a bad job, like I think this is helpful to think about like what's the next stage for how people are using AI. And I hadn't honestly even given thought to parallelization with agents. Like I said, I'm more on the noob side of all
No,
this.
not I don't think you are. Okay, my show and tell for today is very, very simple. It is a just a physical clock, which is like a Pomodoro timer clock.
Oh,
It's, I
that's
mean,
cool.
you can
Yeah.
get it online. I just thought it was cute. I saw it on Amazon. It only goes up to an hour. It has this really nice like color, and essentially it'll just
I
you
almost
saw
bought
you saw
that.
this on Amazon,
Yeah.
and then it'll just
Yeah.
beep.
It's been a
Yeah.
while ago.
It's very simple. I just
That's
really
cool.
like it. It's just like this nice little physical Pomodoro timer, which I've been using a lot, especially with like consult.
I have a $9
Yeah, but
Amazon
it's
one
less
that I
cute. Isn't this cute? I
yeah,
like
I
this.
know, right? I should have done that.
Okay, what's yours?
So I got this thing, which I don't think I've shown you yet. Have I shown you this
No,
like little
no.
Macintosh? It's a clock, and you can actually like it's got a display, and you can set an alarm on it, and it tells me the temperature, it tells me the date and time, and it has a little like actual floppy disk that you can insert and remove, and that's what turns it on and off. I don't even know if I can get it out of here, but yeah. So there, I pulled it out. There's a little
That's
floppy
actually so
disk,
cute.
and then if you want to start it, you put it back in.
That's
You
actually
know,
really, really
it's kind
cute.
of cool,
I
right?
have a like almost like a
It has a
I have
smiley
a
face and
keycap
everything.
version of this.
Not that I really need extra desk accessories, but just couldn't say no to it. So, and yeah, you can like change the
I love
contrast,
that.
and that's about it.
I
But
love that.
yeah, it's
Okay,
fun.
what's your technical show and tell?
Technical show and tell. All right, so this is very specific to a specific JavaScript framework, which, if you know me at all, you know it's Astro, and that is there's this new kind of content collections helper called Astro Editor, and I really like it because it steals a lot of design inspiration from something called IA Writer, not AI, IA Writer that's been around forever that I've used a ton. That's just basically like a writing tool that has just a very simple UI that makes a lot of sense with my brain. And I've loved it for, I don't know, 10 years at least. And so it steals that same design language and concept, but allows you to write Astro content collections using this tool. So I'm going to do a video on it at some point. But yeah, it's called Astro Editor. If you use Astro and write content collections,
That's
check it out.
awesome. I know nothing about this, but that's awesome. Um,
Thanks for being happy
I'll
for
keep
me.
mine short. Mine is an anecdotal one. I did a three sessions some AI teaching seminar for one of the companies I'm consulting with. And it was I quoted them for 10 hours and it took me more like 40. And now I understand all the effort that went into creating your Astro course. Because I realized there's a big difference between creating like smaller YouTube or YouTube Shorts videos versus like I don't know, a seminar where you actually have to create demos that are reproducible and things like that. And that was a really good learning experience for me. So that's my anecdote.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Is that something people can check out, or is it kind of
it's
their own private
this
thing?
slides and it's more private to that one company. Well, I
Okay,
don't know if they want me to share it, but
sure.
it was a very good experience for me. Definitely probably underpaid myself, but I'm totally happy with that. I'm glad I did it, and it was a little bit stressful, but also very fun.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel like it took me at least a year of basically using every spare second I had to do the Astro course, and I still have so much I want to do to it and redoing it, and so yeah, it's just a lot of work.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to this episode of Convos.dev. Hopefully you learned something about AI, even though it was maybe a little bit of a scattered conversation. But as always, if you want to learn more or listen to any of our other things, go to Convos.dev or check us out on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. But yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time, Chris. See ya.
See ya.